Dear students, today my topic is for 8th class subject history. The name of the topic is Civilizing the Native, Educating the Nation. By British, natives here mean Indians. So we can say that Britishers thought that it is the duty of the British people to civilize, or we can say in other words, to guide the Indians. It means to educate the Indian people according to British style of education, according to Western style of education, because they thought that Western education is much better, Western education is much forward, Western education is much more developed than Indian system of education. Our subtopic here is how the British saw education. There were two groups among the British people. One group of people who were called Orientalists. Their system was called Orientalism. One group was Orientalists. Among the Orientalists was John Locke. Among the Orientalists was William Jones, Colebrook. They thought that Western Indian system of education is also good. Indian languages, Indian subjects are also having more valuable material. They thought that if we want to rule Indian people for a long period of time, if we want to make our system in India, our political system in India more strong, if we want to rule the country for a long period of time, it is our primary necessity, it is our primary need, we should have the knowledge of Indian subjects. We should have the knowledge of Indian languages. That is why about William Jones, he was a great linguist also. He knows French and English, French and Western languages much better, but he also began to learn. उसने क्या किया? उसने काम शुरू किया कि उसने इंडियन लैंग्वेजेस को भी पढ़ना शुरू किया, क्योंकि उसके मुताबिक अगर हम हिंदुस्तान पर अपनी पकड़ मजबूत करना चाहते हैं तो हमारे लिए ज़रूरी है कि हमें इंडियन लैंग्वेजेस पर भी अपनी यानी पकड़ होनी चाहिए. तो one of the he was supported by another person called Colebrook. Colebrook also thought that in order to be the master of the Indian subjects, we should learn the Indian languages like Persian, like Hindi, like Arabic, like Sanskrit. That is why they began to establish madrasas, they began to establish Indian schools, like they established, William Jones established a madrasa in 1781 in Calcutta. In Calcutta, he established a madrasa in which Islamic law, Arabic, Persian was taught. He thought that by educating the Indians in Indian languages, by educating the Indians in their native languages, it is much better for us to teach them in English languages. If we snatch Indian languages from them, if we take Indian languages away from them, they will not believe us easily. So he thought that we have to give them education in Indian languages. Indian languages, by giving them education in Indian languages, Indian people will be able to understand things much better than they will understand it in English, because they do not English much better as they know their native languages. But another group of people who were against this theory. The name of the person who was one of the leading among the Occidentalists was James Mill. James Mill thought that if we began to read and write, if we began to give Indians education in their native languages, it is a waste of time and nothing else, because Indian system of education is full of errors. There is no positive, there is no anything we can say good in Indian languages. So there were two groups among Britishers. One group headed by William Jones thought that we should have good faith, we should have good mastery over Indian languages. But another group who was headed by James Mill thought that it is waste of time and nothing else. So here we should look that Orientalists were those people who thought that if we learn Indian languages, it will be much better for us. In order to that, we should be able to rule India for a long period of time. But another group like James Mill thought that if we learn Indian languages, give much time to them, it is a waste of time for us and nothing else. So these two groups were contradictory to each other. James Mill criticized the Orientalists on the ground that there is no reality that Indian system of education is something having good in it, because Britishers thought that if education should be only by the means of English language. And only education is good which is in the means of English language. If there is no use of English language, it is for no use. One of the philosopher of Western thought had passed away. His name was John Locke. He said once that God had given us a right called divine right. He was believing in a theory called divine right theory. According to divine right theory, he thought that God had given Europeans a duty. God has given Europeans a mission to civilize the inferior people. By inferior people, they mean the people of Asia and Africa. So we can say here that the Britishers thought it to their duty to guide or civilize the natives, because natives here mean Indians. So they want to educate the Indians by the means of English language. That is why in 1813, a great educationist, we can say in British had passed. He had once said that a single shelf of good European library, a single shelf of good European library, एक we can say as एक single shelf जो यूरोपियन लाइब्रेरी का है वो ज़्यादा वैल्यूबल है हिंदुस्तान के सारे लिटरेचर से. यानी एक तरफ से हिंदुस्तान का सारा लिटरेचर लिया जाए, दूसरी तरफ से यूरोप की लाइब्रेरी का एक सिंगल शेल्फ लिया जाए तो ये बराबर है. इसलिए हम ये कहते हैं कि जेम्स मिल वाज वन ऑफ द पर्सन हु वाज बिलीविंग इन इट. He thought that we should educate Indians only by English languages. Number second thing, there were two groups. One group of people were those who were Indian thinkers. Indian thinkers were also there. Indian thinkers make various efforts that we should not be snatched by the British. The British should not snatch our native languages. But the Britishers were giving only stress that the English language, the English education is only good for Indians. A person came in India in 1854. The person was called Charles Wood. His report is often called Wood's Dispatch. Wood's dispatch was his report. According to Charles Wood, Indian education is not as good as the British education is, because he thought that British education is full of knowledge of science and technology. Indian system of education is not good because it is not related to the knowledge of science and technology. So Wood's dispatch also gives stress that we should educate Indians. His report was called Wood's dispatch. You will see in your questions. His report was called Wood's dispatch. He thought that if we want to give education among Indians, we should give them it in English languages. So in this topic, we had discussed something that means civilizing the native means we have to civilize, we have to guide Indians. Educating the nation means educating the Indian subcontinent, we can say. How the Britishers saw the education? There were two groups. One group was called Orientalists and second group was called Occidentalists. The Orientalists thought that we should have mastery, we should have to read Indian languages, Indian subjects in order to make ourselves able to understand the English, understand the Indian system of education. But some second group who were called Occidentalists, their head was James Mill. He thought that the Indian system of education is full of errors. There is no positive thing in Indian system of education. These two groups were contradictory to each other. But one of the group who were called Orientalists, they were headed by William Jones. William Jones gave always stress that if we want to rule India for a long period of time, it is essential for us that we should have mastery over Indian languages. So you should focus in your homes on this chapter, and I will give you later more lessons regarding the chapter. But today, due to the less speed of internet, this is enough for today. Thanks.